Welcome to the pilot episode of the Digital Diversity Podcast, a show all about queer games and the fantastic folks that make them. I'm Kaiju, pronouns they, them, and I am a games journalist, a game streamer, and a all about queer monster. And today I'm joined by our co-host, Maddie.
Hello, I'm Maddie. I go by time patches on the internet. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a panromantic, if I could speak English, asexual lady. And I make visual novels all about queer shit. It's lovely to be here. I'm so excited.
All right, I should tell people what I am as well. I am a non-binary, aporagender, demi-bisexual. It's hard to figure that one out. Like, it's more like demisexual biromantic kind of thing going on. Welcome everyone to the pilot episode. So what is digital diversity? Digital diversity is a project developed in order to provide a much needed spotlight for folks in the games industry who are part of the LGBTQIA plus community. Mainstream's game media is woefully uncaring about the queer community as a whole. That's not to say that there aren't some absolutely incredible journalists out there, but the AAA games media doesn't care too much about queer issues, often treating it as a fringe group or entirely unworthy of attention. Digital diversity aims to challenge that by reviewing games made by members of the queer community, interviewing the people involved, streaming their games, talking about them, and making this available so that marginalized developers can spread their word to a wider audience.
And now we have a podcast to add to that big family.
And now we have a podcast. It has been about 2 years. So this project started unofficially in 2017 with my streams. I did a regular stream called Queer It Up Sunday, where I did pretty much this and a mix of all kinds of stuff. And that ended up developing into digital diversity, and so many games streamed and so many passionate people wanted to hear about it and talk about it that I went, you know what, let's do a goddamn podcast. And Maddie, whose work I have streamed before and fallen in love with utterly, graced to be my co-host on this brand new adventure.
I'm so excited and so incredibly honored to be here. I love your work on the blog, obviously. I was so honored to even be interviewed, to even be on your field of awareness in the first place. So I'm very, very stoked to be here. This is gonna be awesome.
It will be as awesome as we can be.
Yeah.
So let's talk about where we came from in all this, in the greater sphere of gaming and telling our stories and telling other people's stories. So let's start with you, Maddie.
Okay. So as opposed to you, I feel like from what I know, you come from a more kind of media background, covering queer games. I come from more of a development background. So in early 2017, late 2016, I discovered the medium of visual novels for the first time. If you're unfamiliar, it's kind of like a choose your adventure book crossed with a video game. The format started in Japan originally, and then a bunch of people in the West were like, I would like to make those actually. So if you want to find all about that, there's a forum called the Lemmasoft forums. It's all about the Renpai program. You can figure it out. So I played 2 games, well, more than 2, but the 2 that I remember the most are Hustle Cat and Cute Demon Crashes, which were both made with the Renpai engine. So I was had that moment of, oh, I could make these things that I've been enjoying playing so much. So I then leapt into making them pretty much. And I kind of always had a focus on queer narrative, even before I was out to both people and out to myself. I hadn't quite figured all of that out yet, but I was still kind of fascinated with queer stories and untold stories. So the games I played kind of also were doing this. They were including things like they, them pronouns for protagonists or choice of pronouns, lots of queer representation. So I kind of immediately wanted to make content like that. So I started on my first big project, which is still unreleased. It's coming eventually, called Debbie Dado Monster Dating Show, which has like a whole cast of queer, wonderful monster people. And I made my visual novel label, which is called Sad Ghost Studios, which it's really more of like an imprint or a label as opposed to a studio, because it's mostly just me hiring nice people to do work for me. But and then
That sounds like the industry as it is right
yeah,
now.
pretty much. So there's that. I also made the game When Asta Falls for a game jam, which is
I love that game.
which is, I believe, how you found my work, Kaiju. Which is a short.
I fell in love with it.
It's a
so
game
much.
with a succubus and an ace woman, and fucking shenanigans happen. So, yeah, that's kind of my story. That's up to speed with where I am. I make queer shit. I love queer shit, and I'm excited to talk about and review some queer shit. So what about you, Kaiju? Yeah, what about you, Kaiju? I'm excited to know kind of your backstory.
So my backstory is definitely a lot more on the media side of things. Back in 2015 or so, 2014, I was doing book reviews mostly. Somehow most of the stuff that got sent to me was at least queer coded even slightly. I think my editor there knew me better than I knew myself.
That sounds right.
Which sums up a lot of stuff about my life, really. I did media for that. Then I started working for Geek Girl Authority, which handles all sorts of pop culture stuff. I did a lot of game stuff for that. And as part of that, I had the opportunity to attend Gamer Expo Australia back in 2017, I believe it was. And this was so new to me. Like I'd been to APAX Australia at that point, but this one was the first that was essentially all indie games and all queer developers or queer focused indie games especially.
Wow.
And it was really good. And this was before my egg had really cracked. My egg cracking story is a long and painful one, but I got there eventually. It was so profound to me that I ended up a year later, when I came out, going back and retroactively updating my pronouns on my media badge.
Wow, cool.
Because like it was important to me. And thankfully there wasn't a lot I had to change to make it fit. But I got to talk with some absolutely incredible people who were really passionate about the games they were making. And I wanted to see more and I wanted to know more. And I ended up doing my first ever games interviews with a bunch of the developers there. I think I did about 6 interviews and it was hugely fun. And there were some amazing games there, people that I still keep in contact with now. And I knew I had to do more because I was one of the only media people there at all.
That's a sin.
And
that's an absolute sin.
It was a sin. And there were some incredible games there. There were some great VR games. There was Objects in Space. There was so much. And I was so sad that I was the only one talking about this. And pretty much right after that, I decided that if I was going to be doing streaming, I would be including games like that. And then I started streaming and on a regular basis, and that became the thing. I have been going on doing the blog side of things for about 2 years now. I started on, I think it was like Trans Awareness Week or something like that in March 2018, I think. And so we're coming up to year 2 now. And I've talked to so many passionate people from the industry who just want to be seen. Like for them, making a living out of these games would be amazing, but being seen is the big thing.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's what I wanted to do. And then eventually I got around to making my own game after like 20 years of wanting to make a game. I finally got around to making one on Bitsy during like I challenged myself. I had to make something in 2018. So there was non-binary jam or MB jam or something like that was going on that year. And it's like, I'm going to make something. So I booted up Bitsy because that just looked like a super fun and easy engine to use. And I had submitted my game 3 hours later. Like
Wow.
I went I went from wanting to make a thing to having the thing out there and people playing it within 3 hours.
Yeah.
And that threw me so much because it's like it is relatively easy to tell a story. We have these tools.
Yeah.
And that is why we have so many stories out there. We just need people to be reading them and we need people to be telling them.
Yeah. Definitely.
Like in 2019 alone, there were 500 LGBT tagged games on itch. 500.
Wow.
Bitsy Renpai games make a huge chunk of that.
That's true. But there's something to be said for narrative games. You don't have to spend a lot of money on equipment. You don't have to have all of the knowledge base of coding a complex game system. Tools like Bitsy, Twine, Renpai, they just give you the tools and say, here you go, make a story. And people fucking do it. And it's amazing to see and be a part of.
Yeah, I'm so happy and so proud of the community who makes all these experiences and gets to tell their own stories for once.
Definitely.
Because they never see them. They never see them in AAA games. You will very rarely see something.
Yeah.
Like the strongest possible representation I have seen recently has been Pravati from Outer
I
Worlds.
was just about to mention her.
Canon asexual person in a AAA game who everyone fell in love with.
Yes, we love
everyone. Like, and that's the thing. They weren't weird. They weren't different. They were themselves.
Yes, exactly.
And the goal of all this is to make that not the exception.
Yeah.
We don't want to, the idea is not to go, hey, did you see this one example of asexual representation or this one example of a non-binary character? Oh, by the way, they wear a gas mask the entire time. You know, the idea is like, oh, hey, I'm looking for a few games to play that have, you know, that have some non-binary characters or some ace representation or some trans men characters or something like that. Do you have anything you can recommend? And for us to be able to hand them a list.
Yeah.
Not one example.
Yeah.
A list. And just say, these are all good.
Yes.
So quick back to me. I had done writing for that. I ended up doing some writing for Queerly Represent Me, who are an incredible group who are documenting pretty much every game that has queer representation in it. Their database is incredible and it's well put together, and I love them. And the people who are running that are incredible. Where digital diversity kind of stands in relation to Queerly Represent Me is that we want to focus on those people who make the games, not necessarily the games themselves having the queer representation. So this isn't about making a game full of queer characters and queer themes. This is about someone who made something that was important to them, who is part of the queer community. And I don't care if that's a Pac-Man clone or something like that. Pac-They clone.
Yes.
Yeah, we've just come up with them. Or if it is a 20-hour visual novel with a half dozen romanceable characters and a choice of endings depending on whether you choose to romance them or not. Like, it can be any of that. We want to play these games. We want to talk to people about these games.
Exactly. We want to know what the experience is behind that.
Exactly. So in the end, Maddie comes at this from a more development point of view. I come at this from a more media point of view. So I'm kind of outside observer in a way. Although I feel a lot more relevancy to it since I came out and since I've become very passionate about all this stuff. So it is time to move over to the first regular segment of the Digital Diversity Podcast. Future episodes will have themes. We've already got that worked out. We will have special guests coming in. which I'm super excited. And
So
I think
exciting.
I think I've already got about 3 people lined up that I'm super hyped to talk to. Instead of doing like Twitter DMs for 3 weeks to do an interview. So that's going to be super fun. But our first regular segment is going to be You Need to Play This. You Need to Play This is all about games you might have heard of or might not have heard of, and that we think are just awesome games. So, Maddie, you get to go first.
Woo! Okay, so I am already breaking the rules on episode 0, and I have 2 games to recommend. One of them,
There are no rules.
there aren't now.
The first rule of digital diversity is there are no rules.
Noted. Everybody note that down in your journals. There will be a test. So my honorable mention, first of all, is a game that I mentioned earlier when I was talking about my origin story. It's a game called Hustle Cat. It's a visual novel. You can get it on Steam. It's by a small dev company called Date Nighto. And this was one of the very first visual novels that I played. I actually watched a Let's Play of it first on YouTube before I was even playing visual novels. So it goes way back in my story. But this game, there is several, like everybody's queer. There's several different, you can date someone from each gender is what I'm trying to say. And the protagonist has a choice of skin tone and also a choice of pronouns. And I remember back in the day that blew my little brain apart and I was so excited.
So good.
It's also just generally a really high quality visual novel. I believe it was kickstarted back in the day. All of the art is super cute and the writing is so funny and so on point. And the protagonist Avery is so relatable. So that's my honorable mention. Definitely go play it. But my actual nomination for You Need to Play This of this week is a game called Her Tears Were My Light by Nami. It's on itch.io. You can go to nomnomnami.itch.io, which is the cutest URL. It's the cutest URL I've ever heard in my life.
It's amazing.
But if you're in the visual novel sphere, you will most likely have heard or seen Nami somewhere around. She is queer, she's a grey A, and also definitely loves women because all of her games are Yuri. But Her Tears Were My Light is a very short, free experience. It's very clever. I don't want to spoil it too much by talking too much about the content, but it's a very short, easy, bite-sized game to get into. But it plays with visual novel mechanics in a very interesting way. So it's gay and also very interesting to play. So that's my recommendation. Go play it.
How long do you think it's going to be before we have our first specifically visual novel episode of this thing?
Probably not very long.
Yeah, I think that's like we've already got our first theme and I've got a couple more in mind, but visual novel seems like it feels like something that's going to come up very soon because
definitely.
I have like for my stream list, so what happens for digital diversity is that I don't go out looking for games. I ask for the developers to share those. So I will generally still buy the game, but I want them to say, hey, I think I have a good thing. I would like to see someone talk about it and see someone play it. I would like to have a little bit of acknowledgement in this. And I think that's really important because AAA games, people will clamber over themselves to try and get in there, to try and be the one to review it, to be the one who says the most profound thing about this thing. But I want these, I like games that come from the heart, and I like developers that are passionate about wanting to share that.
Definitely.
And about, I would say about 60% at least of the games that come into the list are visual novels. At least.
That's a heavy proportion.
It's heavy on my voice, I tell you what, because very few visual novels are narrated, voice narrated. So someone like me who streams them for like 3 hours at a stretch, or even more, it ruins me in the best way. I remember playing Yearning a Gay Story, which is fantastic, by the way. Highly recommend it. Love that one. But one playthrough for that is like 8 hours, and I did that over 2 streams.
Wow. That's a voice killer right there.
Yeah, I pretty much had to skip the next 2 weeks because I was just wrecked. But I should get to my recommendation.
Yes.
So my recommendation is one that I picked up very recently. It's short and sweet and beautiful. It is called No Country for Straight People by The Last Yuri Samurai.
Amazing
It
title.
it is a wonderful little RPG maker game about a cowgirl in a western town where everyone thinks she's a cowboy and who's just looking for love. And
Amazing.
it has a little cow herding mini game in it, and it's wonderful. And I fell in love with it, and it's something you can play on your phone. So like I played it on the bus ride, and it takes about 10 minutes to play through, but I have a strong passion for these short, beautiful experiences.
Mm.
I've played a bunch of Yuri's games before. They are always amazing, always heartfelt. And this one was just sweet as heck. And it gave me the smile I needed. So you can get that one on itch.io as well. You can just search for The Last Yuri Samurai, or you can search for No Country for Straight People, but that is also going to be on the link that we will have in the description of the thing, and that'll have a link to all of the games that we feature on Digital Diversity. So you'll be able to find it there as well. So I think this has gone pretty well. How about you?
I think this has gone really well. I'm so excited for this journey that we're going on together.
It's going to be such a journey, such a
It
beautiful
is.
gay journey.
Let's set our queer ship a rolling. Ships don't roll, but we're doing it anyway.
I mean, they have to roll into the water first, so that's totally
There
fine.
are no rules on digital diversity.
That's an important rule.
Yes.
So thank you, everyone. This is just going to be a bit of a shorter one today. So we've got now our origin stories out there. You can expect to hear the Digital Diversity podcast every month on the last weekend of every month. So this will be coming out, I think it's on the 18th. And yeah, so for Roundup, I am Kaiju. You can find me at NB Kaiju, ENBY Kaiju, KAIJU, all one word, on the twitter.com. And Maddie, where can people find you?
At Time Patches on Twitter and pretty much everywhere else if you want to bother me somewhere. But Twitter is the best place.
If you want to find out more about digital diversity, you can also head to nbkaiju.com. That is where all of the written interviews have been stored, as well as links to the games list and to the people who make these games. And we also have a Patreon, which we're starting up, and that is going to pay for our hosting fees and all the stuff we need to get this thing going, because these things ain't cheap. And that includes things like paying for these games, because we want to throw our support behind the people who make them.
Yeah.
And
if you're getting these games, make sure you tip the developer if you're able to, because
tip
people put things out. People put things out for free when they shouldn't. So if you have any dollars to spare, definitely tip your game makers. They deserve it.
We're definitely going to have an interesting discussion about finance in queer game creation. But my opinion is having games as pay as you want is fantastic. And I love to see devs who do this, because there are so many marginalized folks who cannot afford to buy games.
Yes, very true.
Even $10, that might be their food for the week. But if you see someone that has a pay as you want and you have a few bucks to spare, throw them a few bucks. It's definitely a little thing, but it really helps them. So yeah, you can get to our Patreon at patreon.com/digital diversity, all one word. We'll have links to everything in the below thingy. So thank you very much, everyone. We will be
Thanks,
back.
Everybody.
We will be back next month, and we will have our first guest and our first theme and all kinds of stuff. Things are going to
exciting.
Things are going to get very, very gay. Very.
Yes.
We've been pretty toned down for the pilot episode, but things gonna get gay around here. So
Buckle up, kids.
buckle up, kids. Until next time, this is Digital Diversity. This is Kaiju.
This is Maddie. Yeah.
Look after yourselves. Look after each other. Remember that you are not alone. And we will talk to you next time. See you, folks.
Goodbye, everybody.